Welcome to Ike's Flame. Join us on another Star Wars adventure. Punch it, Chewie. Welcome to another week of Ike's Flame. And thank you guys again for joining us for another Star Wars adventure as we're diving in this week. We're still celebrating Star Wars month, and so we're going to keep celebrating that as we are in May here. And it's another Tuesday, and it is... What's today's date? That's a grand question. 17th. So we're still got, I think, 2 more weeks out of this. So it's our third week. We got 5 Tuesdays this month. So we're going to get a lot of Star Wars month in this month here in May. And so we're going to dive into another character. But before we do that, here in May, if you guys have been listening, we've been doing a question of the week. And so we're going to have another question and for you guys. And so if you guys want to answer the question, respond. And I'll try to get, if I get some answers, I'll try to get them on to the podcast the following weeks. May even go into June a little bit. But we'll get them on, get them up there if we get some answers. And so you guys can email me at ikesflame@gmail.com with your answers, or you can DM me at ikesflame on Instagram. And so hope to hear from you guys on that. And so so our question for today, and this is like, so last week we did like your favorite character or character you dressed up as. This week we're gonna in this month we're focusing on the original trilogy. So all your answers have to do with the original trilogy. So my question for you is, what is your favorite side character? And so when I say side character, I mean character that doesn't have a name. So it's more like a group of, like, a collection of characters. So it could be like, I really like stormtroopers, or I really like, I'm trying to think of like Ewoks, to the Royal Guard that we see in Episode 6, the guys that are all dressed in red from head to toe and have these like pointy pike stick things. And so, like, what's your favorite side character that we see? I'd even consider the Wampa in the Empire Strikes Back on Hoth would be a side character in a lot of ways. So like, we don't know their name. It's kind of, we see them. It could be like a rebel scout or some sort of rebel soldier that you really think is cool. And so I just want to know, like, what is your favorite side character in the original trilogy? And so whether it's stormtroopers or other like Imperial officer of some sort maybe, and that sort of thing, or even some sort of droid that we see. I don't know. So I just love to hear you guys from that. So what's your favorite side character? A character that doesn't have a name but that we see in the original trilogy, or I mean, kind of can be a set of characters. But yeah, so with that said, so if you guys want to respond to that, like I said, email me at ikesflame@gmail.com or DM me at ikesflame on Instagram. And so we're going to continue on today, and so I'm super excited. So I'm starting to the weather's getting nicer here, so I'm just going to share this because my setup for recording the podcast is I have it very flexible. I live in a small apartment with my wife, and so we don't have a whole lot of room, and I don't have the opportunity to just keep everything set up. So the weather's getting nicer, so I'm actually recording in my garage now, so it gives a little more space, and also gives just nice to have the warm weather here. So I was starting to figure out how to record in the garage and get that all set up. So that is what we're doing, and so I'm excited about that. Just kind of share a little bit what's going on with me. And so this week we're going to jump into another original trilogy character, and as I've talked about last week or the last couple of weeks, not necessarily diving into like their background and their like story arc quite as much, some but not quite as much, and more going with the idea of like iconic moments, funny moments, and those sorts of things. A lot of fun. And so as we kind of reflect on the original trilogy here during Star Wars month and that sort of thing. And so the character we got this week, probably would be considered a dark side character, kind of almost neutral. Just kind of does his own thing, and that character is Boba Fett. Boba Fett is a really awesome character, fun character that we see, and it's very interesting. I think Boba Fett is. If you guys want, we're not going to dive a whole lot into the backstory of actually how he was created. I'll tell you a couple things here, but if you guys really want a good, it's like a short documentary. I think it's like maybe 20 or 25 minutes or something like that. It's on Disney Plus if you guys have Disney Plus, and I forget what it's called now. But anyways, so a couple of things about Boba Fett is, one, he has a very, very amount of limited lines in both Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. We don't see him at all in the initial A New Hope, and the initial Star Wars movie. We don't see him at all. So he's just in the second two of the original trilogy. But he's very iconic. Like, people recognize who he is, even though he doesn't have a whole lot of lines. We don't get a whole lot of exactly interaction with him. And he's definitely, in a lot of ways, a side character. He's one of the most iconic Star Wars characters out there. And so, in the original trilogy, and obviously now, we have the Book of Boba Fett out on Disney Plus, and he was in The Mandalorian, and this is after the original trilogy, so we have him there. So we're learning more about him. And also, if you guys watched Star Wars: The Clone Wars animated TV show, he was in that as well, and so we get to see a little bit of him as a kid, and he's also he's in the prequels as well, as we see he's the clone son of Jango Fett, and so we get to see him some other places and learn more about him. But in the original trilogy, and to start off with, he's a side character that was very iconic and not, I don't know how you say it, but didn't have a whole lot of lines. But people knew who he was, and probably a lot of it is due to his armor. And so, one fun fact about his armor: when George Lucas and the creators, they were all working on this. I think initially the idea was he was going to be a kind of a super soldier for the Empire, but he kind of dissolved into this idea of a bounty hunter, which is what he becomes, and working for Jango Fett, or working for Jabba the Hutt, and that sort of thing. But the other thing we see with this is initially his suit was completely white, and so which is very interesting. And then they painted it and made it look rustic like it was, and beat up and that sort of thing, which is fun. But his suit initially, when they were making it and coming up with him, it was initially white, which I think part of that was due is the first idea of him and his armor was to be some sort of a superior stormtrooper, super soldier for the Empire, which didn't come to fruition, but we still get the basics of his armor just in a different color, and that was probably the reason it was white initially, I'm assuming. And so we have this, which I just think is kind of fun. Like I said, I'd go look up that Disney Plus thing, and it talks a little bit more about the creation of who Boba Fett is and the armor and how they came up with him. But so that's just kind of a couple fun things, neat things about Boba Fett off the bat, so just a couple things to start with. So Boba Fett is, like I said, he's very almost a side character, but he's also very iconic, which is, I don't know, I just find that fascinating, like I mentioned. And so I think for me, so I'm going to go through my list of 5 things, kind of talk about Boba Fett, what's funny, what are those iconic Boba Fett moments, and that sort of thing. And so we're going to start with iconic moments. And so we're going to do, I know the past weeks I've done iconic moments from each movie for our characters, but this week we'll be starting with Empire Strikes Back and going towards going into Return of the Jedi, because he's not in A New Hope. So I think for me, as I was thinking about this, the iconic moment for me in in Empire Strikes Back is when they are getting ready to put when they're getting ready to put Han and Carbonite on Cloud City, and Boba Fett, I'm not going to get the quote right, but he is hold on a sec, he's concerned about Han not dying, and he's like, what? He's like, he says something along the lines of, like, I can't have him damaged, he's important to me, or something like that, because Han owed a lot to Jabba the Hutt, and Boba Fett was sent to get him, and all this stuff, and that sort of thing. And so we get a little bit of, and Darth Vader then responds with, don't worry, if he's damaged or whatever, we'll compensate you. The Empire will compensate you. And so, but we get a little bit of insight on who Boba Fett is at this moment in time. Is like, Boba Fett is kind of this, like, he's like, I'm going about my job, I'm doing what I need to do to survive, and like that sort of thing. And like, we get this idea, like, he cares about himself and not necessarily about anyone else. And so we see this, and it's just interesting. We start to see a little bit of his character, even in a very short glimpse of like dialogue. And this may, not 100% sure, this may actually be the first dialogue we have from Boba Fett at all. And so I just think it's interesting. And if we like look at this, and I just think it's iconic and telling about Boba Fett, and we'll like and I'll get into this later, but so we'll talk about kind of his dad and Jango Fett, and also the Book of Boba Fett later, and a specific quote I think that expands on this. But so yeah, that's an iconic moment from Empire Strikes Back. And so the iconic moment I think I remember the most from when I just think of Boba Fett and that sort of thing is in Return of the Jedi, is when Han is and this actually doubles for me as my funny moment as well. And so number 2 funny moment, that's also the other thing I think, is when they are on when Jabba is getting ready to try to execute with like Luke and Han and Chewie and Lando, and they're at the Sarlacc pit and that sort of thing. And so they are on the sand barge things, and they're ready to be fed, and then the fight breaks out and that sort of thing, and the Luke and Han and the others are trying to escape and this sort of thing. And we have this moment when somebody says something about Boba Fett, and I think it's Han that swings around and hits Boba Fett's jetpack, which explodes it, and he kind of takes off. And I just find that it's kind of a very iconic moment, something I remember from Return of the Jedi and that sort of thing. And also him going into the Sarlacc pit, because that's always been a mystery. Like, ever since that happened and until the Book of Boba Fett, there's always been those rumors of like Boba Fett survived and all this, and they and he may even survived in some comics and things. I don't know off the top of my head, but like, it's like this idea is like, what happened to him at the Sarlacc pit? Like, surely he didn't just die. Like, he's very iconic. So there has to be more to the story and that sort of thing. And so I just find it fun that like that's kind of an iconic moment that has spurred on a what if moment for the next like 50 years or 45 years or whatever it is, until we got the Book of Boba Fett just recently and past handful of months ago and things. And so I find that as kind of like an iconic moment. And also more of the funny moment is when Han just is like, Boba Fett, where? And like swings around and bumps him as complete like accidentally, but it's what sends Boba Fett into the Sarlacc pit. Doesn't kill him, but at the time probably potentially thought he was gone, and so it's just fun to see that and it's just an iconic moment, I think, and kind of a funny moment too, because Han has this worry, but then deals with the worry pretty easily, and so, but that iconic moment has also spurred on speculation for the next how many ever years, and been as the talk of many Star Wars conversations and that sort of thing, and speculation and all that. I'm sure many Star Wars buddy friends have sat down and had conversations of what happened to Boba Fett and that sort of thing over the last how many ever years, and so I just think that's fun. And so that covers our first two, iconic and funny. And I think the other thing is, this is our third thing we're going to talk about. And this goes back to the first quote we mentioned there for iconic, and kind of that scene in Cloud City when they're going to freeze Han and Carbonite. Is it like his third thing is like his prominent characteristic? What is Boba Fett's prominent characteristic in that sort of thing? And so I think it's interesting to see that, like, Boba Fett is kind of really looking out for himself. He really is what we get this first picture of what a bounty hunter is. Boba Fett is kind of this iconic, like, okay, here's a bounty hunter, here is that sort of thing, and we know he's a bounty hunter because when Admiral Piet and Vader are on the Star Destroyer, and we see Bosk and some other bounty hunters there as well. They identify them as bounty hunters, and makes a line of bounty hunters, we don't need their scum, and this sort of thing. And so this is our first idea in a lot of ways of what a bounty hunter is, and how a bounty hunter is self-serving, selfish, and they're just out to make a profit. And this is kind of what we get a little bit for Boba Fett, and even in some ways just out to survive. And this brings me back to like a quote that we hear in, I think it's, in Attack of the Clones episode 2 in the prequels, where Jango Fett, his dad, says, "I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe." And Boba Fett, I'm pretty sure spot on, quotes that in Book of Boba, or no, actually it's in Mandalorian season 2. And so we like this idea of like, I'm here for myself, I'm just trying to survive, I'm just doing what I can, trying to make a profit, make life a little better for me. And like, almost in some ways it's a common folk type of idea of just doing the best I can. And Boba Fett obviously gets into bigger implications in the galaxy and plays a bigger role, but we do see this idea of like, Boba Fett's main characteristic is his bounty hunter-ness, and what we start, that's not even a word, but what we start to understand as a bounty hunter is someone who is a loner, out to do the best for themselves and make the most of opportunities that come to them, whether it's a good moral choice or not, and that sort of thing. And so we get to see this in Boba Fett, and kind of, I think the other neat thing is like, with Boba Fett, we also see this, like, yes, in some ways he worked for the Empire and did a little bit, but he was also on his own. And, like, Boba Fett also introduces us with this idea of being a loner and not that sort of thing, and not joining sides. We see this a little bit with Han, but we also start to really get to see Boba Fett as this, like, one of the main first characters that don't get pulled into the other side of the Empire or the Rebellion. He sides with the Empire because he can make some money off of it, type of thing. But he doesn't ever stay with the Empire after that, really. He's more committed to Jabba the Hutt and kind of this crime underworld, and this sort of thing, and just making the most for himself. And so we get to see a little bit of a character who doesn't, who doesn't align with the Rebellion or the Empire, is like not dark or light. Kind of, I think I mentioned this earlier, is like he may kind of be dark side. He's somewhat evil, but in a lot of ways he's almost just neutral, just doing his thing, and that sort of like that type of thing. And so I just think we see this idea of like he's a loner, he's doing it himself. I think I've heard like some people talk about how like the Mandalorian is a little bit like a space western, like a space cowboy, and I've heard like Han referred to as a space cowboy, and I think it's this idea that like Boba Fett is kind of like a space cowboy. He's doing his thing. He has his armor and what he's doing, and he doesn't part with that. And as his dad and he both say, he's a simple man trying to make his way in the universe. And so I just think it's interesting. And it's just like he's that learner space cowboy type of idea that we think of in what he's doing. He's neither good nor bad necessarily, and just is trying to make the most for himself. And that's not always a good thing, because I think he is more than willing at times to take advantage of people. But in which we see his character develops in the Book of Boba Fett, and we see that's not as much the case, but that's part of it, and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of that like prominent characteristic, and it's just fun to see and kind of see that like space cowboy, that learner type of aspect that never actually sides with either side, and where Han does eventually kind of succumbs out the way, but joins the rebellion and leaves his space cowboy ways in some ways, not completely, but in a little bit of ways. And so, but with that said, so we kind of have this learner. I'd say that's that prominent characteristic, that thing of like, and even like I think as we talked about earlier, like he's just an iconic character that has very few lines in the original trilogy, and people knew him. And I remember watching some like. I think there's some other documentaries and maybe even the one on Disney Plus on this, but this idea that like when he was so prominent and iconic that like they had Star Wars parades back when like all this was happening, like when the first while the first trilogy was coming out, and this idea of like he was the one that walked beside Darth Vader, like he was that like people knew who he was. Like it was like he was almost on the same level as Darth Vader, and it's just interesting to see that and the iconicness, even though in a lot of ways he didn't necessarily play a super prominent role. And so I don't know, it's just fun to see. It's interesting to think about, and I think it's interesting to think like how did he like why did Boba Fett of all characters capture their attention, and which I think the other thing is like it plays into this like we eventually get to Mandalorians and all that, and Boba Fett's not a Mandalorian, but he has Mandalorian armor, and so we have all this like going to Mandalore and all that, and so that eventually becomes a thing, and he gets associated with that some, and just everything going on there, and this idea of bounty hunters, and I think that's like. The other thing is like the idea of a bounty hunter is kind of a new idea and like this like space cowboy thing like we talked about. So anyways, I'm rambling now. So let's move to what do I want to move to? Oh yeah, number 4. So today we're just gonna have 4 things, then we're gonna do some speculation, and just we'll get there. So, because I think the last thing is kind of talking about his journey, which we've talked about through these different things we've already talked about, and because he has such little screen time and such little dialogue, we kind of already covered that, and so we'll move on to some other things, and so. But with that said, we're going to talk. So the next thing is my favorite fight scene / action scene from Boba Fett, and I'm trying to think what would be my favorite fight scene. that we see in the original trilogy. I want to say, like, if we look towards... I'm struggling with this one. Sorry, guys. Trying to think, do we have like a... I didn't think this one through before I did it, as you can tell, but I'm trying to think, do we actually have a specific like fight scene where he's like fighting for sure? So yeah, we do get a little bit. So that's probably my okay, yeah. So that's what I was thinking there. I was trying to remember. So when they're on the Jabba the Hutt's sail barges there, we see Boba Fett. This is where we get to see all of his neat, fun stuff. And so, like, we get to see his jetpack do some things. We get to see him. Pretty sure is that when he wraps up Luke, like, with the rope type thing. He shoots that out of his wrist and like that sort of thing. So we get to see these different things. I think the other neat and like so we just start to see him in action, kind of what he can do, and that sort of thing, which is just fun. So we see the wrist gauntlet, we see the jetpack, we see his like almost like a cut off rifle thing he carries, the long pistol, and we get to see some of these sorts of things. And there's like a missile we see on the top of his jetpack, which we never see used in that sort of thing. But it's just fun to see. Like, I think that's the favorite sight scene, and I think that's what it's like. We start to get this idea of like Boba Fett has all these neat tools neat weapons and artillery that he has accessible to him, and it's almost more than what we see in any other from any other character. Like he has these like so many different things he's using and that sort of thing from his head to his toe. And like because I think the other neat thing with this is we get to see all of kind of his artillery, as a lack of a better word to say it. But with that said, like we get to see like when they we see all these things. And when in Book of Boba Fett or in the Mandalorian season 2 we get to see him use his neat rockets and that sort of thing. But the fun thing about that is like that wasn't created for the Mandalorian season 2, and some of the what do you want to call it? Some of the like the books where they like the archives definitely like explore Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi or whatever, like he has labeled on him in those diagrams like knee rockets, or knee missiles or whatever they're called. And so like we get to see just some of that fun stuff, like that was designed and that was there even though we don't get to see it used, which is a lot of fun. And so I think there's like part of the fun about his fight scene and like just the main fight scene we see is kind of just getting to see what he can do. And because we see him and he's like an intimidating character, but we don't know much besides that until then. And so it's just fun to see that and see what that looks like and that sort of thing. And so that would be kind of like my favorite fight scene, who Boba Fett is and that sort of thing. And so a couple other things I want to so like that's my favorite fight scene. I just love and I think that's part of what kind of captured people with Boba Fett is this idea that like he has all these different things he can do and use but he's like a really great warrior, but he's not a Jedi or a Sith or like he's not using the Force in any way. And like we see he's probably one of the best like fighters and warriors we see without being a Force user of any sort. And so I just think that's fun. And so the last couple things I want to get to, and this is kind of fun fact. So when they first did this, they would when all this was coming out and they're making action figures and all this. He actually had a some of you, if you're older and you're listening to this, you might have had this, but you had a rocket that like shot off his back, which was just a lot of fun. But they had to stop making that because that was considered a choking hazard. So that's just a fun fact. Like he was this, he had that. So like, and that goes back to his iconicness. Is this iconic idea of who he was and this armored individual and that sort of thing. And so, but like I said, like he had all these things he could do. And so, but yeah, so action figures eventually got changed because of him in some ways. And yeah, so that's just fun. But I think, so the last two things I want to talk about is first, his ship. So what is known as Slave One, I know there's been a little bit of controversy over changing it to not be Slave One with Disney, and I don't think it's ever got changed for sure. But his ship is very iconic as well, and it's a little bit different ship than we've in any other ship we've seen in Star Wars up to this point. It kind of like lays on its back and that sort of thing. And so that's just fun as well. And I'm trying to think like we get to see a little bit of it as he chases the Falcon, as he's shooting at the Falcon and that sort of thing as well, in the Astro Field and Empire Strikes Back and all that. And he's actually the one that tracks them to Cloud City, and so we know he's very capable even with his ship, but his ship's also just extremely iconic and fun to have and see as well. And that ship carries, I think, is like, I'd say it's probably one of the more iconic ships in Star Wars too. And I think it's just fun to see, because, and this is where my brain goes, and kind of answering this question of why was Boba Fett so iconic. And my answer to this question, in kind of what we've been building to today, is this idea like he was unique in an already unique universe. So Star Wars, this idea of Star Wars and all this was a very unique, awesome, cool thing we see, and captured the imagination and the minds of so many. And then on top of that, he's a very unique character that kind of has this intimidation, he's different than any other character we see in Star Wars up to this point. And it just captured to people's imaginations. And I think a little bit of it as well is the mystery of him. It gave it a little bit of a what if. Like, we don't know exactly who he is, but it gives this what if mystery, this thing that we can be imaginative with and think about. And I think that's what makes him iconic and what makes him cool, along with all that is made up of his armor and the different abilities he has with like the different weapons he has and that sort of thing. And so it's just fun to see that and that sort of thing. And so I think that's kind of where I'm going to end today. I think he's iconic because he's unique within an already unique universe. And at the time, especially at the time when the original trilogy was around, he was kind of his own standalone. Like, we didn't really we knew others might exist in Star Wars universe in the galaxy like him, but we didn't know much about him. And so he's the one we get the glimpse of the most, get the most idea of who he is and that sort of thing. So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm gonna wrap up as Boba Fett for today. And lastly, we're going to do our speculation. Where are we going to see Boba Fett next? Well, we've already seen a lot of him recently in The Mandalorian Season 2 and the Book of Boba Fett and all these sorts of things. And so I want to say the next place we're going to see Boba Fett is... the next place we're going to see Boba Fett, I'm guessing, is in Season 3. Season 3 of The Mandalorian. And so we'll see. I don't know. That would be my guess, and I'm guessing they're going to do another season of the Book of Boba Fett, so that'll be interesting as well to see that and that sort of thing. So that would be my guess. I don't know if there's a chance timeline. I mean, we could potentially see him in Kenobi. I don't know if that would actually be a thing, but We could potentially see him in Kenobi and that sort of thing as well. We could see him in a lot of different places, honestly. But my top three, I'm gonna say we're probably gonna for sure see him in season Mandalorian 2, obviously in season 3 of Mandalorian, obviously in season 2 of the Book of Boba Fett, and then also potentially in Kenobi. I don't know for sure, but I think there could be a potential with seeing Boba Fett and Kenobi, which would be a lot of fun, and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm going to leave today. So thanks for joining me, guys. As we talked about earlier, what's your favorite side characters in the original trilogy? So stormtroopers, Imperial Guards, Rebel Scouts, Rebel Soldiers of some sort, all that sort of thing. So what are those? You guys can email me at gmail.com or let me say that right, ikesflame@gmail.com or at ikesflame on DM me at ikesflame on Instagram and that sort of thing. So thanks for joining me today, guys. And if you guys also have other thoughts on Boba Fett and just iconicness, or want to share some like especially if like you're like, hey, that, like if you were a kid and you're like, yeah, I loved Boba Fett type of a thing, like, yeah, share those. It'd just be I'd love to hear from you guys. So yeah, that's what we got for today. And my teaser for next week is we are going to be looking at some side characters next week, even more than Boba Fett, kind of a group of characters that don't always get talked about a lot, but I find are interesting, and they play a big role in the original trilogy of Star Wars. So we will talk about that when we get there. And so so thanks for joining me, guys, for another episode of Ike's Flame and joining me for another Star Wars adventure. So as we always like to say here at Ike's Flame, light the fire. Have a great week, guys.